So last year I read this book called Dear Elia, and I called my friend at Davis, and I was like, I know who our keynote speaker is going to be. So a couple of months later, we got Dr. Mimi Khúc, to come to our campus to speak to us about disability, joy, and resistance. Dr. Khúc is the co-editor of the Asian American Literary Review and an adjunct professor. Her work includes Open and Emergency, which is this hybrid book arts project decolonizing Asian American mental health. I think this will be interesting to Casimir. The Asian American Tarot, a reimagined deck of tarot cards, which is slightly terrifying, and in all the good ways. And the Open in Emergency Initiative, which is an ongoing national project developing mental health arts programming with universities and community spaces. So her new book, Dear Elia, Letters from the Asian American Abyss, out from Duke University Press, does what academic books are supposed to do, which is to shake up the field. The book provides a decolonization of mental health. It's unflinching and powerful in its argument that we are all differentially unwell. There aren't the mentally disabled people somewhere else. And it provides a pedagogy of this unwellness, as well as opportunities for collective care. Dr. Khúc work is cited in the university and the Asian American experience. She focuses on how the ways, for example, model minoritization and the idea of parental debt, that our futures are ransomed for our parents' past, collides with narratives of meritocracy and how we can lose sight of the structures of racism, misogyny, and classism in these deeply personal struggles. She talks about the experiences of students and faculty, particularly lecture faculty, as we term adjunct faculty here, in their relations with the university system that is hostile to their struggles, even in the very sites that are charged with their alleviation. So we're really grateful to you for your very brave work. And as such, Dr. Khúc embodies the spirit of the KKJ keynote, which is to communicate feminist visions that reignite and rethink the field. So thank you so much for joining us.
Dear Elia, 6 years ago, I made a box and told you to open in emergency. I told you it was an emergency already because I had come to learn as a daughter of refugees, as Vietnamese American, as Asian American, as a woman of color, as queer, as disabled, that the world makes us sick. And we were not meant to survive it. I made that box for you as inheritance, an archive of Asian American unwellness and our attempts to move through that unwellness. I and your stepfather dreamed that box into being, filling it with hope and knowledge and tools, along with those of a whole community trying to make sense of this world so that you and others like you might learn how to save your own lives. To my greatest delight, that box went into the world and indeed began saving lives. Magic. In your hands now is a book. The goal remains the same. Hope, knowledge, and tools to make sense of this world. Everything I've learned in the years since making the box. Everything the life of that box has taught me about the shape of our collective unwellnesses and what it means to hurt and build care and go on living while it hurts in these times, in this world. A central lesson of the box is that wellness is a lie. This book explores the breadth and depth of that lie as I've traveled across its vast domain, and then shows us that the only way to survive is to be unwell together. I hope this book, like its predecessor, goes out into the world and saves lives. This too is your inheritance, my love. a box and a book, the kind of magic your mother has figured out how to make. May this magic help you understand all the ways the world will break your heart, and may it help you find joy and meaning and care throughout that journey. May it help you make your own magic in all your glorious unwellness. From my heart to yours, always, Mama. Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for the many sponsors and organizers involved in putting this together. It's a lot of labor, and I always appreciate that so much, and a lot of care as well. My name is Mimi Khúc. I'm a fair, olive-skinned, curvy Asian American woman with very short blonde hair currently, and wearing an olive turtleneck and pants, and I'm sitting down. Before I start, I would just like to say to please make yourself as comfortable as possible. So that means you're welcome to sit as you are, stand, lie down, walk around, stretch, eat, drink. We are here in our bodies, and this for folks on Zoom as well, please lie down next to your computers. We are here in our bodies, and those things are assholes. So see to their needs as it calls. I open by sharing the opening letter to my daughter from my book, Dear Elia. It's a book on mental health, my framework of unwellness, and the need for collective care, and in particular, how universities make us unwell. I'm going to share today from a chapter on students in particular, and what I've learned from them over the last 7, now 8 years. How do I put my slides up? Yeah, thank you. Yay, okay. That's visible there. Folks on Zoom should be able to see it. Okay. So I've been on a national speaking tour for 7, now 8 years. I do not recommend that. I've now met with thousands of students, teachers, mental health professionals, community organizers, the strange animal, the university administrator, all wanting to figure out why life feels unlivable for students, particularly Asian American ones. And while there are historical and geographical and structural specifics for each place I visited, student experience has been eerily, horrifically similar across them. One through line, students are ubiquitously encouraged to seek help at the counseling center. They're especially told this after large-scale trauma, like a mass shooting, a peer's death, a pandemic. Universities remind students that counseling centers exist and they exist to help. Students are told, you are not alone. I have learned that they feel incredibly, irrevocably alone, even surrounded by thousands upon thousands of other students who feel the same. What does unwellness look and feel like for you? So this is a question I have asked students almost everywhere that I've visited. So I want you to spend just a moment, think of like 3 words or phrases that captures what unwellness looks and feels like for you. If we're doing a workshop, I would be writing this on a chalkboard or on a giant Post-it. Or on Zoom, you'd be writing in the chat. So I'll share what students have told me. Exhaustion, not enough time, feeling like a failure, an imposter, feeling overwhelmed, isolation, no support, pretending to be well, pressure to maintain normal, hopelessness, not doing enough, not being enough, guilt, feeling like a burden, feeling lost, ashamed, something is wrong with me, helplessness. So many students talked about feeling like they had no control, no choices, no agency in anything in their lives. They feel intense pressure to succeed, to not fail, all the different responsibilities they face, all the choices they don't feel they have, the tunneling of their future that feels like suffocation. Be well, do well at all costs. The next question I ask is, what does wellness look and feel like to you? What does mental health mean to you? So again, spend a moment, think of like 3 words or phrases that either describes wellness or defines mental health for you. While I take a drink of water. Across my dozens of workshops, there's some of what we might expect. The ability to cope and bounce back from setbacks, not being depressed, not being mentally ill, whatever the fuck that means, right? But also some richer and perhaps unexpected answers. Maybe these will resonate with what you were thinking of. Feeling safe, belonging, having community that you trust, liking yourself, experiencing a full range of feelings, not numbness, feeling fulfilled, having a purpose, healthy boundaries. Students know a lot about boundaries. A supportive community, feeling valued, feeling understood, the ability to be yourself, hope, feeling like you have a future, being happy, laughing, being able to be vulnerable with others, holding loved ones, and agency, feeling like you have control and can make choices. So in my workshops, inspired by an essay by writer Kai-Cheng Thom, that's Thom, titled The Myth of Mental Health, I show them the World Health Organization's definition of mental health. So, mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. So we're all going to be good humanities scholars now and close read this definition together. And you're welcome to call things out and I'll revoice it into the mic. What are you seeing here? What are the assumptions or assertions, emphases that you're seeing in this definition? Capitalism, capitalism. And where do we see that? Work productively and fruitfully. I always wonder what fruitfully means. I don't understand. What else? Anything else we notice or have feelings about? Normal stress. What are normal stresses of life? I often ask students, is racism a normal stress? And then the answer is like a circle, right? Because it is and it isn't. It's normal in that it's ubiquitous, it is everywhere. But is it supposed to be there? Have we normalized it? And then what does it mean to cope with something like that? Students love to pick this apart where they'll pick apart, what is potential and who gets to tell you that it's been realized? Contribution, what counts as a valuable contribution and to what community does it get noted? So the World Health definition feels both familiar and foreign. It's focused on productivity, individual coping, functionality, the ability to contribute to society is what they and we have been implicitly told our whole lives. Simultaneously, it looks absurd sitting next to the definition that I had on the other slides that students generated collectively together. Then I ask, which definition does your university align with? At my visit to Amherst College, there was a counseling center therapist at my workshop, and they slowly raised their hand, looking at the two lists side by side in horror. I want to do this, they said, pointing to the side that we collectively generated. I'm pretty sure, though, I do this, and pointed to the World Health definition. And they admitted to not knowing how to do the first within the constraints of a university counseling center. Everything put in place is to help students go back to being productive students. No more, no less. Every single student at every single place I have visited over the last 7-8 years has said that their university aligns much more closely to the World Health definition. Another example, in 2017, I was invited to a college that will remain unnamed because we're going to talk shit about them right now, to do mental health workshops for students, but also for their counseling center staff and academic deans. And that's the first and so far last time that I've been invited to do that. It's been the only time. So I thought, since I have deans held captive in a room, let me ask them, what do they think wellness is? So I'll share those. What does mental health mean to you? I asked. Some similar answers as students: having a range and balance of feelings, the ability to be present, to self-soothe, and this is where it goes off the rails. Self-awareness of baseline, especially cognitive. See, you all look confused because I don't know what that means either. Right. Okay, ability to learn, think, problem solve, self-direct. Okay. Free of debilitating symptoms, especially psychosis. Awareness and engagement of social rules. These professionals were defining mental health in terms of students' ability to meet their responsibilities. The focus here, very individual, psychological, with a heavy emphasis on coping skills. Disturbingly, psychosis is some kind of bar for mental illness, and mental health is just to not have it. But also disturbing was how these answers reflected institutional expectations. These answers were deeply colored by the counselors and deans' sense of responsibility to the institution, the need to direct students to meet those expectations. Wellness is being able to follow the rules, to be a good student. So now let's look at what students at this particular college said. And here I actually have a picture of the giant Post-it I had on the wall that's covered in black Sharpie in my handwriting. Mental health is written at the top, and then a bunch of bullet points that I'll read through. So the students said that mental health is having a sense of who you are, your identity, having safety, physical, emotional, spiritual. Wellness is also biological, it's physical wellness. Having an environment that is safe and enriching, encouraging, feeling hopeful, and being able to cope with trauma, being adaptive and adjusting, regulating your emotions, having a support system. Oh yeah, and then there are arrows that point around because I like arrows. So the support system points to coping with traumas, but also to your environment, but also to safety. Having a support system requires having an awareness of your needs, having a community that you can ask support of, and this is the value of interdependence. Wellness is also listening and processing your emotions, embracing emotion, having a range of feeling and feeling free of judgment for those feelings. And then at the tippy top, I see resiliency and healing and historical reckoning. Some of that is thinking about intergenerational trauma. Very different than what the deans and counselors said, right? But even more striking is the difference between how these two groups defined unwellness. First on the list for the Counseling Center deans was sleep deprivation because of too many extracurriculars, procrastination, substance abuse. And then from there, I pushed them and they were willing to expand to academic pressures, uncertainty about the future, imposter syndrome, social pressures, social life and interpersonal conflict, and sense of belonging. And now here is what students said. So here I have 2 Post-its because they kept going. They wanted to keep going on what unwellness looks and feels like. Unwellness is isolation caused by, and I have the name of the school redacted, caused by the structures and the culture of that school. Unwellness is depression, denial of feelings, feeling like you have to do it alone. All the responsibility is yours. Being the perfect student at that school, which means being successful, productive, independent, social, high achieving, no depression, no problems. Normalize stress, stress as romanticized and valorized. I have a little arrow to the word jokes. People make jokes about how stressed out they are, how little sleep they're getting. It's the glorification of busyness. It's the devaluation of your own experiences, being hard on yourself, the pressure to be positive all the time. On the next sheet, competitiveness, not caring for basic needs, martyrdom, lack of precise language for feelings and suffering, lack of trust in people, in systems and structures of support, fear of being vulnerable because of the ideas of strength and weakness that come from capitalism and productivity, and power dynamics. And by that, they mean between faculty and students. So let me reiterate. Unwellness is feeling like you have to do it all alone, like you have to always be productive, independent, high achieving. Unwellness is martyring yourself, not being able to admit your own limits, denying your own feelings, not having language for your feelings. Unwellness is normalizing, romanticizing stress. Unwellness is to be a good student. Next question I asked them, does your university care about you? Unfortunately, I don't have a fancy slide for this because the answer they give ultimately is always no. Particular people at their university care about them, their peers, some faculty, some student services folks. But the institution as a whole does not engage in caring in the ways that students recognize or want or need. Some of you know that I make tarot cards. They were mentioned earlier and said they were terrifying. So my mental health project, Open Emergency, which came out in 2016, includes an original tarot deck, which I would wave around right now, but my partner ran out of the room. When he comes back, I'll make him wave it around. So he and I, his name is Lawrence Minboy Davis, that's Davis, co-edited, curated this tarot deck, collaborating with over 30 writers, scholars, artists, and renaming the traditional tarot archetypes by drawing on Asian American studies, Asian American experiences to make fancy academic words coming, epistemological and ontological interventions. My mental health tour made it very clear to me that the deck needed a student card. The original deck did not have a student card. But to create an official student card for the expanded deck that we did in 2019, we knew we had to develop a new process. It couldn't be, like, I couldn't write it, I'm not a student, and I didn't want to burden one individual student with the responsibility of representing all student experience. So I actually started soliciting student submissions through prompts on various stops on my tour, and very low stake prompts. So it's like submitting just a few words here and there, phrases, a couple sentences to capture aspects of their experience as students. And then I brought together a student editorial team, sifted through all of that material, And then we put together this card. And so this one's, I feel, very special. It's collectively authored, drawing on a range of students' experiences. That is the student card. If you want, I know it's teeny tiny, so there's a QR code if you want to pull it up on your phone so you can see it yourself digitally. So what you see here is the image of the front and the back of the card side by side. So the front is on the left, and the art is by artist Matt Huynh, that's Huynh, and the back is on the right. On the left, you see the number 29 at the top, and the word "the student" at the bottom. It's a black and white digital ink painting depicting a person walking, bent over, carrying bags and a large book, with 6 people stacked on top of their back doing studenty things with a laptop, books, an abacus falling apart, graduation cap, and their arms in the air. The text on the other side of the card is in white font over a teal background. And I will read this. If we had multiple mics, I'd actually make you all read it, but I don't want to make Emily run around too much. Okay. The student is the 29th card in the major arcana, sometimes known as the lost card. The student cried the day of graduation. They play one role for the mother, another for schools, another as the daughter, another for workforces, another as the model minority, another for the state, always in the pull of the annihilating void. The student is, at essence, a note taker. Be grateful, always be okay. Chase the promise of this for hours, never complain, never be sick, keep going. Nothing is ever enough. The work goes impossibly on. Is college life normal stress? What would it mean to leave? Strike that. We are finishing our parents' immigration stories, leaving behind the fact of living. We are not grades, a condition of what can't. Don't feel guilty. Strike that. Drawing the student card in the reading reminds you that student debt extends forward and backward across our collective lifetimes. But ask yourself, what is it you actually owe? Your entire personhood, and then more. We gave you your past, now give us your future. The student urges us to refuse. If schools are a feeder system for churning out good citizens, embrace being a bad citizen. Embrace being a bad subject, a bad student, a bad child, a bad person, a revolutionary. Remember that the Asian American movement was birthed in the fires of student protest here, written by students everywhere. Those fragments in the middle set off by slashes are direct quotes pulled from the writing of various students. The lines that are struck through were submitted like that. Probably not intentionally, but I found them so powerful. How do we read out loud what has been stricken? How to voice what's not allowed to be said or even thought? The last lines of the card are hopeful. All the tarot cards end with reminders and imperatives. They all follow a structure that I just made up, where they describe what the card means, but then at the end give you what to do in a reading, right? If you draw this card, and it gives you a directive. And I especially wanted the student to end with a sense of agency because students talked so much about not feeling like they had agency. But the imperative to be a bad student, to embrace failure, to reject normative subjectivity, to defy structures of power that have told them who they have to be their whole lives. This is absolutely terrifying. The card suggests that freedom and social death are intertwined. Students know the cost of noncompliance perhaps more keenly than the rest of us. I hope this card also reminds them of the possibility in it as well. The lesson is simple. Listen to students. They are dreaming of more than what institutions are giving them. They're trying to claw their way out from the harm institutions are doing to them, from the harm their families are doing to them. Teaching and touring taught me about students' needs, the ways educational institutions do and do not meet those needs, the ways so many of us are failing to meet those needs, and how students are trying to save their own lives. What can student unwellness and desire for new language for their pain and new structures for their care teach us? What can we learn about mental health, the neoliberal university, our own unwellness, our own complicity? How might we begin asking and answering, along with students, how do we live? How might we, who are not students, stay beside them at the edge of the abyss, recognize it as ours too, and speak into it together? Thank you. We have time, yes, for some questions, comments, feelings. Yeah, if folks on Zoom, please feel free to write stuff in the Q&A. Yes, please. Okay, so I'll give you the mic. Is that the plan? Okay.
You've described the situation from the point of view of the students and the point of view of the administrators. What are the factors that would need to be changed, and what would you recommend in terms of making the university a caring place?
Thank you for that. How to make the university a caring place. Whew. So I teach at Georgetown University, where care is in the mission of the university. So it's called cura personalis, fancy Latin words, that means care of the whole person. And so care is supposed to be threaded throughout the university. Of course, I asked my students at Georgetown, does your university care about you? And every single Georgetown student says no. So what is happening, right? What is that disconnect? Because I don't think the university thinks of itself as uncaring, right? And because care is in its mission, there's actually many initiatives around care and wellness. However, what kind of wellness is it that we're reaching towards? Is it the productivity one, right? Is being well being the perfect student? And are the resources being put towards that? Versus what is actually making students unwell? When I ask students where do they feel most unwell? The classroom. So that actually involves then having to revamp our classrooms and thinking about what does it mean to build care into the structures of our classes, which I think is terrifying to some faculty, right? They're like, I don't want to do that. I'm not a therapist, or if you're, women, faculty of color, disabled faculty, queer faculty, already doing way too much mentoring work, right? Disproportionately, because students come to you. So the idea that you should be doing more care work, I think, is a lot for most people. And my answer to that is that it should not come from you as an individual doing all this care labor, right? It should actually be structural. We need structures of care. So what are the structures of care that can be built in the classroom? So I, as an adjunct, have like no say in terms of university, anything. I could be fired at any second. If y'all don't know how adjunct contracting and lecturers work, I get, hired semester by semester. I can be fired at any time. I get paid shit, even at Georgetown that has a lot of money. And so students often will ask me, like, how do we fix this? And for me, I can't from above, right? I can't, no one listens to me. But I have the space of my classroom until they fire me, right? I have that space. How do I build care in this space? And I think starting that small is more helpful. So what spaces do you move in, and how do you build structural forms of care in those spaces? Another way of asking this question, I like to say that my work is making it safe to be unwell. I create spaces where unwellness is not penalized. So what does that look like? How do we create a university where unwellness is not penalized? And again, huge question that feels like unanswerable. But then if you think of pockets of spaces that you actually do have control over, can we start there and think about what that looks like?
So we'll go back and forth with room question and virtual question as long as we have them. Alexia says, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for this work. When I read your work today, particularly your book chapter on adjunct writing, it resonated so deeply to me as a chronic contingent faculty member of 10 years. I'm curious to hear more of your perspectives on how and or why you remain contingently in these violent institutions. Violence for all of us disproportionately. Something I grapple with daily.
Why do we stay? It is an abusive relationship. So I am positioned kind of strangely because I have one foot in academia, one foot out. And so I've chosen actually from the start of my career to not do the tenure track. For students, if you don't know, that means like the working towards the permanent position as a professor, tenured professor, right, full time. Because I felt like that would limit my ability to do the work I wanted to do. Because only certain kinds of work are recognized as legitimate or valuable in academia, right? I never actually thought I would write a book because the book is what you're supposed to do to get tenure. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to make tarot cards. And so I want to work with students. That's where the teaching comes in. And so I started adjuncting to be able to work with students and to try to build a program. And if you read the book, you'll find out that I got fired from that program. Build a program that actually tries to meet students' needs and brings together care and scholarly work. And so then I have like never tried to get that full-time tenure track job, but that does several things for me, right? It frees up my ability to do the kind of work I want to do, but leaves me extremely precarious. So that is the risk. That is the part, the cost, right? Where I can be fired at any time. I was fired from the program that I helped build. And so why do I continue to stay? Because, well, I stay until I think it feels like it costs too much, right? Because right now, it's a strategic relationship. I think that's one big takeaway I want folks to take away from today, that you need to have a strategic relationship to the institution. The institution does not care about you or want you, right? So what can you do to get the resources you need? And how do you take care of each other during that process? And so that's how I approach contingent labor and as being in coalition with each other, but also with students together so that we figure out how to survive this thing. And if you reorient your understanding of the university as inherently harmful, then it shifts how you relate to it, right? Sometimes I tell students who want to go to grad school, I'm like, grad school is an inherently traumatic process. You will not leave unscathed. It's not how it works. It's purposeful, right? So if you want to enter that process, how do you lower your vulnerabilities as much as possible? How do you protect yourself? How do you take care of yourself so that you can get the thing that you want or you need in that process, knowing though that it costs the entire time? So I actually think all of our decisions cost something. The cost may not be visible to you all the time, and I've tried to make the cost for me very visible so that I can figure out what that strategic relationship is. I hope that answered the question. Thank you. That was a great question. Sure.
Sort of building on that question from Zoom, it strikes me as really insightful that so many students know that the institution doesn't care about them and that they're right. I'm a postdoc, so the institution also doesn't care about me, doesn't really care about anyone. But I guess that raises the question for me of, are we trying to make the institution a caring place, or is there some other, are we trying to just create caring spaces within the institution and beyond the institution? Like, is making the institution care a viable goal, in your opinion?
That is a great question. Um, the institution has already co-opted care, right, and wellness. And so that's what I see at Georgetown, right? In terms of care and its mission and its wellness initiatives, individual people at the top are caring people. Sure, nice people, caring people, want to, good intentions. But the way that care has been built and structured is still always towards the goal of productivity. And so that form of wellness is toxic, right? And so my concern with, like you're saying, which I'm hearing sort of in your question, right, is if the goal is to try to make the university care, it will just continue to get co-opted to serve this other kind of corporate neoliberal purpose, right? So top down for me is a really hard to imagine how that is sustainable. And so then for me, it's always bottom up, right, as the way to make sustainable spaces of care by stealing resources so that you can make those spaces. Yeah. Back to Zoom, if there's a.
Okay. What are some historic system harms Asian American students face when accessing mental health? What is needed to transform in mental health to meet cultural intersectional needs?
Thank you. So Asian American students, this is a stat that we love to cite in Asian American studies that have some of the highest rates of suicidal ideation by race. And then what? We like to say that stat, and then what is the solution to that? And the solution always seems to be go to the counseling center, like more people, like let's make promotional videos so that students will, demystify the process so that they'll come to the counseling center. And so much of the resources and ideas go towards that. And my students like immediately laugh when we talk about that because they're like, fuck the counseling center, first of all. Because the resources there, like this person is asking, don't match or work. And so part of the ways that I've talked to counselors in particular, this is like gonna be like a 5-part answer. So let me back up. Okay. The counseling center should not be the only place that mental health happens. I want mental health to happen in every space, right? I want care to happen in every space across the university. So that's my first sort of answer. And that's the only way actually to cultivate a kind of care for Asian American students. The next part of the answer is that the stakes for failure are very high for Asian American students, much higher than other students, especially if there are students who are the children of immigrants. Because success for the children of immigrants takes on a whole different meaning, the burden of carrying your parents' sacrifices, your ancestors' fucking sacrifices, right? And making meaning of that and surviving in the US. That's a pressure and a burden that I think a lot of counselors in mental health don't understand, where they'll say things like, you want to change your major from like, pre-med to English? Tell your parents, it's fine. And the students are like, are you fucking kidding me? Like I will be disowned, right? Because the stakes feel so high. And so like there's this kind of disconnect. Understanding Asian American mental health requires understanding racialization and the model minority. So it's not just an issue of cultural competence, it's the issue of Asian Americans are pushed to be these perfect kinds of students from all different directions. And that perfection, reaching towards that, striving towards that, and falling short of it all the time, because we will always fall short of perfection, right? Nobody can be perfect. The perfect student is an aspiration that we're told we're supposed to reach towards. And so I call it the slow death of not being enough all the time, not feeling like you're enough. And you have to understand where that sense of not being enough comes from before you can actually create the care that Asian American students need. And for me, it comes from certain kinds of racial dynamics and the immigrant family, which also intersects with racial dynamics. I talk a lot of shit about the immigrant family in the book as well. And refugee family. I come from an immigrant and refugee family.
What do you think would happen if the university would be oriented toward not training for the marketplace, but teaching for human development? What do you think would happen if there was not grades that measured people's success or grading on a curve? What do you think would happen if institutions really recognize different ways of learning and issues about cultural competence in terms of understanding people's interests in terms of where they're located in their life experience? Do you think that that would help?
Now, the answer to all those questions is yes. And you're identifying, I think, various aspects, right? Very, very astutely of these different forces that affect students. I think because I only have control over my classroom, I do a lot of experimenting in my classroom in terms of revamping my syllabus. And actually, I do that in the book where I show a pre-pandemic syllabus that I read for filth of my own. And then I show a post 2020 syllabus where I'm changing structures in my classroom to think about crisis and care differently, because the pandemic made it very clear to me that we were all in crisis. And then I was like, wait, I think we're always in crisis. I think we were in crisis before the pandemic. Why are we teaching the way we've been teaching? And so if we start from the assumption, this is kind of my thesis, the assumption that we are all unwell, meaning we're all going through shit at any given time, how does that change teaching? If we're all unwell and I don't want to punish my students for being unwell, how does it change teaching? And so it changes it in some of the ways that you're mentioning, right? And I experiment in those ways. So I have, I threw out grades. I have no attendance policy, like no mandatory attendance, which both of those things usually like make faculty like, I don't know, throw up in their mouth a little bit if whenever I say those as suggestions. But I talk through these changes and what needs to replace them, right? So one of the ways that I do that is I think about like, what is learning supposed to be? Let's like back up. What do we want students to do in the classroom? What is the point of the classroom, right? Is it to prepare for a job? And then if it's not, how do I get students to do the thing I want them to do, like, do the reading without punishing them towards it? And so I had to get creative to think about different ways of getting students to meaningfully engage. We require attendance because we want engagement, right? That's why professors increasingly become more tyrannical about attendance, because they want students there to engage in the learning. And also professors take it very personal and feel like you're disrespecting them. So it's our shit. So if I want engagement, how do I get there without requiring attendance, which inherently punishes unwellness? And so that required coming up with different kinds of strategies. And I think starting with those questions, then you can maybe move out from the classroom or, port them elsewhere. But for me, digging into the classroom and the syllabus and thinking about what I'm trying to actually do, something I ask my students is, how do you want education to feel? If you say unwellness happens the most in the classroom, and I tell you it should not feel that way, how do you actually want it to feel? When I ask my students, I'm going to make fun of my friend Jim Lee here. He and I talk pedagogy a lot, and he sometimes I will ask students, like, what is the ideal class? What do you want? And they look at him like he's speaking their language, right? Because that's way too big of a question. And also, like, if you haven't been in a different kind of class, it's really hard to imagine your way out of the traditional classroom. And so my way of getting to that is feelings, right? What feels bad in a classroom and what feels better? And then we think about those things, right? How do you feel cared for as a whole person, a human being? How do my policies make sure I recognize you as a human being and a whole person? that then comes to this classroom and does the work that we want to do together. That was like a little bit all over the place, but I love talking about teaching, so I can talk forever about different policies, and like I can get really specific if folks want, but I want to make sure we have, I think we're a little over time, right? 5:30? Okay, we're not over time. So no, I'm happy to like 5 more minutes. Yeah, let's do 5 minutes and then I can also informally hang out until 5:30, but 5 more minutes of.
Thank you. Sorry about that miscommunication. We have a question: most acutely during the pandemic, but always before and after. As a faculty member, I was/am charged with student wellness and care, but no one was/is trying to care for or support faculty. Like the students, I don't think my university cares about me. What structures of care can be built for faculty to give them the space to be brave in the classroom, the wellness from which to be able to build care, not just survive while self-emptying?
Thank you. Yes, we faculty are deeply unwell as well. I have a chapter in the book called The Professor is Ill, where I dig into faculty experience. I have two-part answer to that. One is I think about care in the classroom as collective, meaning that I need the care too, right? It's not just the students getting the care. I also need care. So how do we do this together? Because access is not, we tend to think of accommodations as transactional. It's like, I have this disability documented and I can get this approved accommodation and I get the letter to the professor says, yes, you can have time and a half or whatever, right? That's a one kind of transactional exchange between professor and student. Access is relational. It's much more about how we all are in relation to each other. So it's much messier than the time and a half, right? It's thinking about everybody's needs. How do we meet everybody's needs? There's going to be friction. There's going to be messiness, but it's a process that we should be engaging all the time. And so when I ground my classes in that ethic, then my care is just as important, right, as my students' care. So how do we build in things that make it make it more livable for me as well in the classroom? That's the first part. The second part of the answer is, again, I'm going to invoke my friend Jim Lee. That's Lee. He's a full prof. Tenured full prof, meaning like if you don't know, that means full professor is like the highest rank that you can have. He ostensibly cannot be fired. And so something he does is try to protect junior faculty and give them space to do these kinds of experimental things in their classroom, right? By saying this is by supporting them, but also making these larger kind of claims about teaching at his university so that these people are not stigmatized or punished, right, for not following traditional classrooms. And he tries to basically use his power and privilege as much as possible to make that safe. Like I have no power and privilege in the university. I can't do that. But depending on your social location, how can you make space for that kind of work where you can get the care as well? I just some real nitty gritty. I cancel class when I'm sick, whenever the fuck I want, right? Because, I'm not limited to being sick 3 times, like how we like to limit our students, right? 3 excused absences, right? We're all getting sick all the fucking time for all kinds of things. And by sick, I mean like, it can be physical illness, but also like, I've really tried to validate some of my students. Like a breakup is fucking awful, right? That is a serious emotional trauma. That matters. That's you as a whole person going through something awful. That also is a reason to not be able to engage in the ways you might want to in a classroom. So yeah, I cancel class. Students don't have to come to class. We find different ways of engaging if that happens. A question I ask students, and they also ask me, which is kind of amazing, is, does this feel manageable? Because why do I get to decide as a professor arbitrarily how much work a student should be able to do in a certain amount of time, right? And so when I ask students, look at the syllabus, look at the assignments, does this feel manageable over the next 2 weeks? And if they say no, then we actually negotiate and we figure out. Same goes for me. Like, this is not manageable for me, this amount of grading, right? So we have to figure out how to shift the assignment so that it's manageable for me over the next 2 weeks because I have to deal with XYZ, right? So that kind of flexibility is required. Again, it's messy and there's no like clear cut ways, but the commitment to the care is what matters, and the process is what matters.
Well, we have lots of other questions, but we're totally out of time, which is a reminder to read the book and learn more and find other ways to engage with all of the incredible themes you've brought together for us today. Just such a peppering of examples of your teaching, which makes it so clear how lucky your university is to have you. And we're very lucky that you got to spend some time with us today. Thank you all so much for being here.